Alrighty, so we are now midway through week 4 of the NFL season. For you today, I have my running back tiers and rankings for week 4. And without further ado, we're going to hop right into that. So at number 1 this week, I do have CMC. On the year, Christian McCaffrey is tearing it up through the air. He's basically getting the targets of a wide receiver 1 or high-end wide receiver 2 on this 49ers team. To be fair, though, he hasn't looked quite as efficient on the ground as we saw in 2023. So hopefully at some point in time, that'll bounce back a little bit for this team. He's still overly involved in the passing game, so he is going to get there no matter what in week 4. At number 2, I have James Cook going up against the New Orleans Saints this week. The Saints' run defense has not been as bad as last year, but it still doesn't look that good. James Cook has a lot of touch equity and touchdown equity for this Bills team. It should be a super high scoring game for the Bills. This should set up James Cook in the third and fourth quarter to be able to run the football way too many times and absolutely demolish and pop off in week 4. At number 3, I do have Jonathan Taylor going up against the LA Rams this week. This game should be super duper high scoring. I do love that for Jonathan Taylor. On the ground, he's getting it done. He's still involved in the passing game. This Colts offense, as long as Daniel Jones doesn't turn into a pumpkin, is going to end up being a top 10 scoring offense on the season. This should set it up where Jonathan Taylor is going to be, top 3, top 4 running back week over week over week. At number 4, I do have Bijan Robinson going up against the Washington Commanders. He didn't look quite as good in week 3 as he did in week 2. Obviously, it wasn't 165 rushing yards on 18 carries. It wasn't just him popping off. We are hoping, obviously, that Michael Penix Jr. looks a little bit better in week 4. That should set it up where Bijan is able to get it going on the ground a bit more. He's not getting such loaded boxes. He can get it going on the ground, get it going through the air. Bijan Robinson is the top 5 guy for the rest of the season. End of story. At number 5, Devon Achane going up against the New York Jets. For Achane, it's kind of the same story as Christian McCaffrey. Hasn't been as effective on the ground. This offensive line for the Dolphins has been kind of poor like it was last season, but it doesn't really matter, just like it doesn't matter for CMC, because he's going to get involved in the passing game. He's going to get a lot of targets, a lot of receptions, a lot of touchdown equity on this football team. At RB6, I do have Saquon Barkley. My biggest concern this week is the matchup. Saquon is an elite talent, but the Bucs' rush defense against running backs is number 2 in the NFL. They are giving up, I think it's under 55 yards a game to the running back position. They're going to be able to kind of limit Saquon to a certain extent, but when you have an elite running back against an elite rushing defense, it does kind of even out a little bit in the wash. Saquon Barkley, just like the last few guys, is going to be a top 12 running back every single week, regardless of matchup. At RB7, I do have Jahmyr Gibbs going up against the Cleveland Browns. My biggest concern this week for this matchup as well, and these are kind of more justifications why they are lower, even though they looked good to great in week 3, is because this Cleveland Browns defense is not letting you run the football, and they're not really letting you pass the football that effectively either, but they are really stymieing the run at kind of a crazy pace right now. But the great news for Jahmyr Gibbs and why I still have him this high, he's involved in the pass game, his workload is going to be fantastic, and he's also involved in some schemed up touches. At RB8, I do have Josh Jacobs. This game is going to be really weird. Can't make up my mind with this game if it's going to be hey, Matt LaFleur is talking to Jordan Love, he's like, hey buddy, throw the ball for a couple hundred yards and we'll call it a day. The Cowboys aren't going to be able to score on our defense, and we're just going to rely on Josh Jacobs against this subpar Cowboys run defense to just kind of salt the game away in the third and fourth quarters. Packers are probably going to be able to get out to a pretty sizable lead, be able to limit Dallas in their scoring opportunities, and set it up where Josh Jacobs, like I said already, can salt the game away in the third and fourth quarters. At RB9, I do have Derrick Henry at the Chiefs. I don't care about the fumbles. I don't feel like those are very sticky. Derrick Henry doesn't fumble the football, traditionally speaking, so I'm not too worried about that going into this week's matchup. My biggest concern is the Chiefs' run defense has looked pretty good last year and has looked pretty good so far through the first few weeks in 2025. I am hopeful that this is kind of like a Derrick Henry bounce back revenge game because of what happened in week 3. I'm also kind of anticipating, because of this rivalry between the Ravens and the Chiefs, we're going to see Lamar pop off and Derrick Henry pop off and have very big performances in week 4. So at RB10, I do have Amari Hampton. It is the highest I've had him on the season. There is no more roadblocks in his way. He is set up to be the RB1 on this team. Don't know if he's going to get 85% of the touches like we saw in week 3 after Najee Harris went down. But if he does end up getting a sizable workload week over week over week, he's going to be in a smash spot for the rest of the season. This week going up against the New York Giants, their rush defense is horrible. Their pass defense is horrible. This is going to be a lot of points scored by the Chargers. It really comes down to kind of like what I said with Josh Jacobs. It could be where Justin Herbert gets it done in the first half, and Jim Harbaugh's like, hey, we're going to let the rookie run the football more than we did even in week 3, and it could set it up in the third and fourth quarter. Amari Hampton is getting a lot of touches, and they could still be very high-quality touches because of how bad this Giants defense is at stopping the run. At RB11, I do have Jordan Mason going up against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Don't love that the matchup's over in Dublin, but at the same token, Steelers haven't been able to stop the run. Their defense as a whole has kind of been in shamble-ish for the first 3 weeks, so I'm not really in love with how they've looked. It should set it up where Jordan Mason is able to eat, much like Omarion Hampton and Josh Jacobs in the third and fourth quarters. At RB12, I do have Bucky Irving going up against the Philadelphia Eagles. We saw last week Kyren was able to get there, and we also saw Blake Corum look pretty good, and he is a smaller back, a little bit more similar to Bucky Irving's size and speed. I am hopeful that this week, because of the wide receivers missing for this Bucs team, that it should set up Bucky where he's getting the most targets he's had in a game for the first handful of weeks, and I am hopeful with the higher number of targets this week that it'll set him up to easily finish as an RB1, even though he's going up against a pretty good Philadelphia Eagles defense. At RB13, I do have Kyren Williams going up against the Colts. I said it earlier, this Rams-Colts game is going to be very, very high scoring. Kyren Williams is in store for some goal line carries. He's in store for a lot of touches. He's going to be involved in the passing game. He's set up to score a lot of points this week. I have him just outside of an RB1 this week. At RB14, I do have J.K. Dobbins. This is the highest I've had him on the season. It's more about the matchup and the fact that he is still the primary running back for this football team. The Broncos are going up against the Bengals. It's on Monday night. Bengals defense has been horrible. They can't stop anybody. We saw what Jordan Mason did in week 3, rushing for over 100 yards. Like they're just getting popped, not just by Jordan Mason, but by everybody. The Broncos could get out to an early lead. J.K. Dobbins is already going to tear it up without them having a lead, so he really could salt the game away for them in the third and fourth quarter. And R.J. Harvey might even look halfway decent in this week's matchup just because of how bad the Bengals have been at stopping the run. At RB15, I do have Travis Etienne. Etienne has been a big focal point for the Jacksonville Jaguars for the first 3 weeks. I didn't like that he lost the goal line opportunity to Bashal Tutin, so it's something we have to monitor going forward. It does make me a little concerned for that because if Etienne's not getting the goal line work, he is going to be losing a little bit of touchdown equity on this football team. At RB16, I do have Ashton Jeanty going up against the Bears. The Bears can't stop the run, they can't stop the pass, but dang can they score points. I'm hopeful that this game is going to be very high scoring, not like where it's not competitive, where somebody's getting blown out, but that each team is just able to score against these lackluster defenses. I'm also hopeful because of how bad the performance has been for the Raiders for the first few weeks, that finally Chip Kelly's gonna be like, you know what? We're giving Ashton Jeanty 22, 25 carries on this game against the Bears front four, and run defense is pretty bad. And it could finally be the week where it's not just flashes. It is a game where he's actively involved, getting a large chunk of carries, and he ends up popping off a few big runs, and is a guy who you feel really good about having started in week 4. So at RB17, I do have Breece Hall. Love the matchup against the Dolphins. He is set up to absolutely smash. The Dolphins are like bottom 5 or bottom 6 in rush yards allowed per game to running backs, like 101 yards or something like that. If Justin Fields does play, I don't really care. I'm assuming coming off the concussion, he's not going to run all that much. This should set it up where Breece Hall is able to do the primary running for this football team, whether it's at the running back spot or the quarterback spot, against this front four for the Dolphins that cannot stop the run to save their lives. Breece Hall, because of the matchup, should be in a position where he should absolutely dominate. At RB18, I have Kenneth Walker Jr. going up against the Arizona Cardinals. So the biggest reason why I have Kenneth Walker this low after scoring so many points against the Saints in week 3 is, number one, Zach Charbonnet is going to end up playing this game more than likely. So I don't know how that split's going to look. The other concern I do have, though, is the Cardinals are not letting you get a lot of yards on the ground. Right now, I don't think that they're top 10. Maybe they're like number 11 overall in rush yards allowed per game to the running back position. So that does give me a little bit of pause for Kenneth Walker. It's a couple of things that I'm not as comfortable with, but either way, I have Kenneth Walker pretty comfortably around RB18. At RB19, I do have Alvin Kamara. My biggest concern for Kamara on the season, he's not getting those check down targets like we had with Derek Carr last season, and that makes me a little bit worried for him on the season. I am hoping, because of how many points the Bills are going to be able to score against the Saints, that it is going to set it up where it's a lot of passing for Spencer Rattler in week 4. Hopefully they can get Alvin Kamara more involved through the air. He's going to get more of his work done effectively through the air. It sets up Alvin Kamara where he's more involved in the passing game, the screen game, and he ends up dominating in week 4. At RB20, I do have Trey Benson. This is kind of more of a hedge than anything else. He's going up against the Seattle Seahawks defense. They're not letting you run the ball that effectively. I've not seen Trey Benson play a full game yet since he's been drafted, so it's kind of a hedge. He could pop off and he could finish as like RB15 or 16 on the week, or he could kind of bust a little bit this week and be more like RB26 or 27. At RB21, I do have Javonte Williams. This is the lowest I've had him since like week 2 now. It is more of a concern about this Packers defense. They are not letting you run the football. They are not letting you pass the football. There is no CeeDee Lamb in this game. I know that they may not have ruled CeeDee Lamb out yet on Sleeper or ESPN, but like he is not going to end up playing. They've already talked about potentially putting him on IR. Harder matchup against the Packers, not letting you run the football. CeeDee Lamb, regardless of what anybody tells you, is not going to play in this game this week. It is going to set it up where Dallas is going to have a hard time running the football. It could also set it up where they have to pass the ball a lot. That could kind of take Javonte Williams a little more out of the game plan, because if Dallas is getting the doors blown off of them by Green Bay because their defense is horrible, he's not going to be as involved in the passing game as like a George Pickens or KaVontae Turpin or Jake Ferguson or anybody else who can actually catch the ball, not out of the backfield. At RB22, the lowest I've had him on the season is Chuba Hubbard. He hasn't been too efficient on the ground through the first 3 weeks. Not as worried about that because it's looking a little bit better week over week over week. The biggest concern is the Patriots. They're not letting you run the football. They're top 5 in rush yards allowed to the running back position through 3 weeks. I don't love that. Christian Gonzalez could be back. If that happens, Ted McMillan's probably going to get locked down by him. And if that happens, can't run the ball, can't pass the ball. It's going to set it up where this is going to be a pretty hard game for the Panthers to win and be in a positive game script, especially since their defense is probably going to give it up to Drake May on the ground and through the air. You did draft Chuba to start him though, but I do have him here as a low-end RB2 just because of the matchup and because of him not absolutely popping off so far through the first few weeks. At RB23, I do have Jaylen Warren. Jaylen Warren has not been that great on the ground, but he's overly involved in the passing game. Aaron Rodgers mentioned was after week 2 or after week 3, he's got to get him the ball more in the air because he looks so great when he catches it. I know it's kind of like counterintuitive, but because of how well the Vikings get pressure with 4, and when Brian Flores brings the blitz, he gets pressure as well. It should set it up where Aaron Rodgers has to check it down to Jaylen Warren early and often in this football game. It should set it up where Jaylen Warren is a viable RB for you, even if he is a lower RB2 in week 4. At RB24, I do have DeAndre Swift. The reason why I have Swift this high, even though he hasn't looked that good, is because of how high scoring I believe this game between the Bears and the Raiders is going to be. Kyle Monangai didn't look very good in week 3, so he is going to be like the RB1 on this football team, whether the Bears and Ben Johnson likes it or not at this point in time. So until that changes, he's going to be a fringy RB2 for me pretty much every single week, especially in these matchups that are going to be higher scoring. Okay, so there are my RB1s and RB2s. I'm going to run through my last little list of guys real quick. Quinshon Judkins. Next, I have Tony Pollard. Next, I have Chase Brown. Next is David Montgomery. Next, I have Cam Scatterbo. It's going to be Ramondre Stevenson and Travion Henderson. Alrighty, so there are my week 4 running back tiers and rankings. Hopefully this video helps you get just a little bit closer to winning your fantasy football championship in 2025. Before you go, I know the waiver wire's already passed, so don't yell at me. I'm just trying to be the messenger, right? My videos for the waiver wires since like week 2 have been more focused on deeper leagues. So if you're in a deeper league or even a shallower league, go check that video out. There'll be some people on there who I almost can guarantee you are still available even in your deeper leagues. Stash them, put them on your bench, monitor how they look like in week 4 and week 5. And if they start to emerge and pop off a little bit, you could have somebody that's going to be very viable for you in the back half of the season. Hopefully I'll see you guys again. No, hopefully you guys will see me again real soon. And until then, y'all have a blessed day.